Hello and welcome to Adventures in Venueland, an EVMC podcast. Join us for this all-access pass backstage and behind the scenes with some of the brightest minds that cross the scope of the live event industry. I'm Dave Rettelberger.
And I'm Paul Hooper. We'll introduce you to incredible guests who journey with us as we dive deep into the world of venues, tours, festivals, and everything in between. Grab your laminate and meet us in Venueland.
Today's guest joins us from the sunny skies of Tempe, Arizona. We're speaking with a 30-year veteran of the sports and event world. He spent a decade plus at Boston's TD Garden, heading up marketing and PR there, 7 seasons with the NBA's Bullets and Wizards, as well as sales and media relations for the NFL's New England Patriots and NBA's Seattle Sonics. But I'm excited to talk to him about his current adventure. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Activate Sports and Entertainment, Jim Delaney. Jim, how you doing?
What is up, you legends?
It's about time we got you on this pod.
Holy cow.
Because I know that you've been on our short list for pretty much the entire 4 years of this podcast. So,
well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for many people. I'm so proud of you guys, number one, for starting this thing, for the duration, the consistency, and the quality that you guys have delivered for I can't, 4 years. This was like a COVID adventure project to keep kind of everybody connected during some rough months that we all had. And to see it still going for so long. And just mad props to you guys, but huge appreciation too for doing it. It's great.
Paul, am I right that Jim is our 99th guest officially?
Number 99. Yeah, he was joking with me that he said that, he told me there was at least 100 people out there that were smarter than him. And we were able to find 98. So
I know we talked about it early on. And I'm thinking, how many guests are these guys really going to do? 20, 25? How
He's
long
thinking
is this
if
thing
he
gonna,
delays enough, he doesn't ever have to do
I was
it.
like, if I keep pushing the can, kicking the can, I don't have to get on this thing. But I did tell you, I said there's at least 100, and I made it to 99. So
everybody's got a unique story to share, and Jim, I'm not sure anybody has a story quite like yours. But let's start off with the present day. So tell us, what is Activate Sports and Entertainment, and why are you in Tucson today?
Oh man, I don't even know where you start with me. Right? It's my life is kind of my own again now. I have 3 kids, 2 just graduated from college, and 1 has just a year and a half, couple years left. And I was in Boston for 25 years, and it was amazing. But the last few years, you sort of get into that stage, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit in that way. Like I think of things in kind of 7-year stages of life. I think in college or somewhere, must have learned this thing. I think it was either in business or maybe a sociology class about 7-year cycles. You think of kind of a bell curve. And I sort of applied it to myself personally and professionally of 7-year cycles. So what if you imagine your first 7 years of life, right? And you're going and going, it's very foundational. And then 7 to 14, think about that kind of transition to that type of foundational bell curve of your life. 21 to 28, oh my God, right? You're in a whole nother growth bell curve of your life. And then you're getting into the business world and your career and the merging of your professional and your personal life now from those years on. And I've just kind of always had that in my head. And I've thought about it a lot on both sides of the fence, work and life and balancing it all. And we all challenged by all of that. And especially when you get into those middle phases of kids and partners and where you want to be and what you want to be doing and how do you make it all fit together. And then I've seen so many of these. You can call it a bell curve or a 7-year. I just call it the wave. So I think of a 7-year wave, and you get into the later stage. You get to be an old guy like me, and you're like, okay, I've seen this movie before. I've ridden these waves.
Sure.
You can kind of start to anticipate some of the stuff that's going to come next, or that you're not sure what's coming next, but you're like, oh, I've ridden this before. I can do this again. And if you're in a low part, you feel like you're drowning. You're in a riptide. You're like, I've been here before too. right? I can get out of it. I know how to swim out of riptides. I can get, and I'm at a point of my life now where it's a whole nother wave. And I'm just entering another chapter, call
Yeah.
them chapters, waves, cycles, whatever you want. And it's exciting for me, right? So the last couple of years I've been on a new wave, and I'm not sure exactly where it's going, but it's been a couple of years of for me leaving the Boston chapters of my life kind of behind me a little bit and having the luxury of now being able to take on projects that are, I was going to say across the country, but for me, the last couple of years, it's been across the pond in Europe and just seeing things from a different perspective. So that's a long way to say I have no idea what I'm doing right now or where Activate goes for the next 7 years and the next chapter. But yeah, I'm loving being out on the board and riding the waves.
What is Activate Sports and Entertainment?
Activate is an agency basically that I started when I left the Garden. My background was all in team and arena world, and the challenge of that for those of us who are, who are currently in the bubble of your team or your venue, if that's all you've done is team and arena life, when you want to get out of it, that those skills are transferable. Sometimes the rest of the world doesn't know they're transferable,
Right.
right? So you're stuck in this, somebody looking at your resume. Oh, you worked for the Sonics and the Patriots, and you were at the Bullets and the Wizards. Oh, that's great. When I had only worked for NBA teams and I moved to Boston, everyone was like, oh, you should call the Celtics. Like, I don't want to work for the Celtics. I don't want to work for a team anymore. I've done that. I don't want to work. But if people think that's all you know and all you can do, you're maybe pigeonholed into that,
Sure.
what people know you as, or what those skill sets that they think you have. And I think it's even more noticeable now in like this, right, LinkedIn culture of, I call it stacking the blocks. You're stacking blocks of your career and it's all there for everyone to see. Oh, well, what's that? Well, that goes to that. And I only noticed it really when I had run my wave at the Garden and I needed a new challenge. I had little kids at the time and I was like, I can't do arena life and have a life. I can't work, Bruins and Celtics and concerts and Disney on Ice and Globies. And it's like, I can't do this and I can't get home for dinner, much less coach a game at that point. And I had done all the stuff I wanted to do there. I had built a great team of people who were doing all the fun stuff that I used to get to do. And it was more corporate. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll go work for an agency. Nope. No, you can't do that because you don't have 8 to 12 years of agency experience. And I thought, well, what the hell have I'm basically running the largest agency in Boston. Like I'm placing more media with the Globe and everything than anybody else is. I'm doing more promotions and more high profile events than anybody in this market. But oh yeah, you can't work for an agency. Okay. Well, maybe I'll go work for a brand. Got a million great brands in Boston. Go to Dunkin' Donuts or Boston Beer Company or Gillette or Reebok is based there. Like, no, you can't do that either because you don't have 8 to 15 years of brand experience. Okay. Well, what the hell is the Boston Bruins? Some of the biggest brands,
Biggest
one
brands
of the biggest brands
not only in the city, but in the sports, right?
in sports.
Yeah.
And what we've done with those brands and how we built the Garden and how we built the Garden, I call it the new Garden brand and the Celtics and the Bruins so I just finally was like struggling. I was probably at the tail end of that bell curve, that wave of like, what's next? Where am I supposed to go? And I was wanting to stay in Boston. And I finally got to the point where I was like, well, you know what? There's no rules that I can tell that says you can't just go start your own damn agency. And I have no idea what I'm doing. 15 years later, I still don't know what I'm doing, but I can go jump off a cliff or jump into a wave that seems way bigger than I should be. It's deep waters. But somebody who ran a small agency that I had met he was in Portland, Maine, and he said, jump on in, the water's fine, just start paddling like hell. And I was like, you know what? Shit. I mean, if other people have done it, I could just go do it. And so that was kind of the start of it. And I called it Activate Sports and Entertainment because activation was a big thing around that time. That was it was marketing activation. So working with brands on how we were going to activate, whether that be through an event, through partnerships. And it sort of has just served me well as kind of an umbrella for a catch-all of whatever I want to be doing.
You have obviously taken on various clients throughout this Activate era. And how, was that things that you were able to leverage relationships you already had, or do you think you have like a skill? I would say you probably do, and I'm sure you have identified it in yourself, but like a skill for the pitch. Can you approach like a Red Bull and sell yourself, sell your services, and feel confident that you can land? A lot of it is relationship once you get in and you build clients, and then those people move on to other companies, and you obviously can leverage that. But when you're starting off in that first year or two of Activate and you're trying to get your footing, what did you kind of lean into?
I guess I didn't realize it at the time, but at the end of the day, I mean, all business is, people buy people. Yeah, you buy products and stuff, but like in our business, it's the people part of it. And when I first left the garden, yeah, I knew a lot of people in Boston, and all of a sudden I was getting calls. So the BAA, which is the company that runs the Boston Marathon, called and said, "Hey, we just won the U.S. Olympic women's marathon trials, and we need help with that from a partnership." And I was like, "Can we hire you? Or, can we talk to you about it?" So I went in and talked to them, and I'm like, "Well, you can hire Fenway Sports Group over there, or you can hire little old Activate here, and we're both going to sell kind of the same thing, right?" And so we know the business and know what the needs are, and I kind of went in as like a poor man's Fenway Sports Group. I'm like, you can hire a big agency, or you can hire a small agency, but here's the team, and here's like I'll spend a lot of time and effort on this. You'll get me. You're not going to get some account executive at a big agency. And
Right.
if you go to other agencies that don't know sports and entertainment, they just don't get it. Like they don't know the pain that we've lived of living that all day, so
Right.
you can talk, we can all talk to people at teams and venues in a way that somebody outside of our world just can't understand it. It's like talking to somebody, if you've never had kids, it's just hard to describe what parenthood means and how it changes your life and how invested you are, time and money and everything in these little creatures that become your part of you. So I think that was part of it. And then, one thing leads to another, and get a call from somebody else. And I don't know if Life is Good, the stick figure kind of clothing guys that,
Sure.
at the time they're really on a mission to, what I loved about them was the mission of it. They're not selling t-shirts. They're on a mission to spread optimism around them. I'm like, yeah, I love you guys. And we want to do festivals around the country. I'm like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. But yeah, I believe in the mission. I believe in what we're doing. And I had hired Shelby, who we all know and love, amazingly, Shelby Thompson, who worked with me at the Garden. I'd hired Shelby on our team. She had left and gone to Florida and come back. And I hired her. One of my first hires at Activate was Shelby back. And so we talked a lot. I said, look, the marathon is kind of what started as the Olympic trials became helping with the Boston Marathon in full for a few years. And we're running media relations for that. I'm like, do we want to take on this festival strategy? It means doing a festival in Golden Gate Park and St. Louis and Toronto. So we started taking on things because it was exciting and fun. And then you realize when you're halfway through, you're like, oh my God, it's a lot to manage, as a small group. And you're right, like the Red Bull guys, I got connected to these people, and Red Bull doesn't hire agencies typically, right? They do most of their stuff is in-house. They don't do things in a traditional way, right? They don't come in and sponsor your team or your venue. They go build their own stuff. And again, I just fell in love with their culture and I was getting a master class from them on how they do branding, how they do marketing, right? We'd sit in these. So I said, yeah, I'll help you guys with your Boston and New England stuff. And what do you want to do? And I think it just evolves. You kind of take on what felt right at any particular time. And at certain points, okay, well, we have to put down this one client because either we've outgrown them or you guys are good now. Like, taking on the Boston Marathon is a massive event, and it limits us from taking on other things that would keep us growing, So
Sure.
love you guys. We need, and I think that's again part of the chapters, part of riding the waves of. And at the time when we were heavy with events, all of a sudden I'm watching what these guys in this Matt and Paul guys in this Kentucky are doing with this social media stuff, right? And I'm like, where the hell is Lexington, Kentucky? But I'm learning from what Paul and Matt were doing early on with social, right? And I'm just an early adopter. I'm curious. I like equal parts student and teacher, so you can always be learning. And I would be, one of the first people on Twitter and following what are we doing with this? But how can this help us in team and arena world? Or how are people using this differently? And then that kind of took us onto a whole nother wave of like, no, let's get out of some of this labor intensive event stuff. Like, I don't want to do the Boston Marathon for 5 more years. I don't want to, be doing all these Red Bull events for more years or what can we do now? And it became social and digital and kind of was like, oh, let's just ride this wave.
Which is an endless wave that's continued to last
Wave
forever and only swelled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Paul, you've seen it from the very beginning and you've ridden that wave really well. And you see the ups and downs of those and the crashing waves and all. Well, now it's like, I'm on that same train, but early on AI, right? I am like, oh my Lord, this is way bigger wave. And so I am the last 2 years been, on a deep dive into AI and figuring out where this wave is going to go and doing that same kind of thing. But I think it keeps me fresh. It keeps me learning new things and then being able to translate these new learnings in the same way that we used to do with social and digital and consulting with the Minnesota Wild and building the stuff out with the New Jersey Devils. And everybody is still in the new phase, right? They're still new and challenging. But I tell people all the time, I'm like, we sat in a meeting and keep in mind, we'd already done a bunch of really cool social, digital, like award-winning kind of stuff with a couple teams and a couple venues. And we sat in a meeting and the Boston Bruins marketing and communication staff just fighting me tooth and nail about starting an Instagram account. Like that sounds insane right now, right? But they at the time, oh guys, we don't have the resources, and I don't know, JD, is this going to be like their next MySpace? I'm like, I don't effing know. Like, who knows? I have no clue. I'm just telling you, here's the business case for how and why we should package these things and how we can make another $1 million for you and blah, blah, blah. And so, you ride that wave and some people are still figuring out how to get on the board. Are you on a surfboard? Are you on a little boogie board? Are you floundering in there and you need a life jacket? Like, where are you in your stage? Well, here's how we can get you along. So that's how I mentally think about things like that. And now I can apply it with AI. Like some people totally don't get it, are scared of the water. I'm not going in there. That's scary.
Sure.
If you go in there, you're going to drown. You're going to drown. Okay, well, it's coming. It's like the internet. Like it's there whether you want it or not. We could choose to surf. We could choose to walk. We could just choose to, maybe I'm just going to walk along the beach and I'm just going to see what the temperature is. And I'm like, let's go out there, right? I'm like trying to see how far out I can get early or figure out what kind of board do you need to ride this bigger wave. And I think that's the fun of it. I think that's the fun of jumping off a cliff when I left the garden, and I didn't want it to be Delaney and whatever, but I was like, just call it something, call it Activate. And it can be whatever I want it to be at whatever time I want it to be.
There's day one, there's that day one of, because there's somebody listening right now who's at the end of their stage of maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 7 years, but they're at the end of and they're thinking, I could, thinking about, maybe but there's always that bit of hesitation, that doubt, or that thing that's holding them back. And what was that day one like for you? And how did you get over that fear of the unknown?
Yeah, I think you could choose for it to be some scary shit, or you can just, like, I thought I probably waited 2 years too long, right? I was already, again, think of a bell curve, and from a business growth perspective, you're building something for the first 2-3 years. If you're doing anything, you're building a company, you're learning every day, and it's a growth. Then after year 3 or 4, right, Paul, you're at RUP, you're killing it. I mean, you're kind of, I got this. I'm good. 3, 4. You can either reinvent yourself earlier into a new bell curve, or you can just plateau and just but as soon as you start plateauing, the nature of it is going downhill. Like you're going to be less engaged, doing like you're less creative. God, if I had a great idea for the Globetrotters, I would have used it 5 years ago. I'm just running out of, I don't, it's the same shit all the time. So either you're reinventing yourself in your career or are you in the same job? That's just the nature of us as humans, like typically, especially for us who are in these roles. I mean, you go to EVMC and it's that energy. It's that kind of crowd that comes to this, that goes into this industry. We have to be crazy enough to go do it and love it every day. Like, why wouldn't, And so I think you maintain that love or you say, what's next? And I think a lot of people, I reinvented myself within an organization. You say, oh, I'm not going to just do PR. I'm going to do marketing now. Oh, I want to learn more of this digital, or can I be of more value? Can I get promoted? Whatever. Or if there is no natural curve, like I was kind of limited, like, oh God, I got to stay in Boston. This is becoming more corporate. There is no more growth for me. What is that? Is that a new company? Is it, and it doesn't have to be starting your own thing. I think that's kind of aggressive. Especially for me, 15 years ago, there were no co-working spaces and people weren't doing this. There was no other people. I didn't know anybody else who left the team in Venueworld and just did. The co-working space for me was a place called Panera. Like that was my office for 6 months was Panera Bread because it was the only place that had Wi-Fi besides Starbucks. So I hired my first two people. We worked out of Panera for a month until I could oh my God, I guess we have to get office space. But I think now it's easier for consultants and people and you can have a family maybe and only want to work 10 or 20 hours a week. And you could do that now a little more easier. I think it's not as scary. The scary parts, I think, are just, the health insurance and these things. But I always thought at the time, day one, I was like, you know what, whatever. I've been talking about this for 2 years probably, or thinking about it and being like, maybe, well, I know I have a couple clients lined up already. And if it doesn't work out, I'll go get a real job. I can go work at a coffee shop or something. It's like you become confident in I know the skill sets that I at least have. It's not like have nothing. I can apply them somewhere and I'll try this. And if it doesn't work out, I'll go get a real job. And I think I still feel that way.
What is the root of your drive for innovation? Because I feel like as long as I've known you, and I admire this, it's something I certainly, you rubbed off on me, but also it's just something I've had, and it can be daunting at times where it's like you can't sit still. It's like you almost always have to have that next challenge. But it's also something that is really exciting because it does help you. Like you said, it helps in those mundane moments where you always have that other thing floating in the distance. You're like, this is going to be something new that we've never done before. No one else has ever done it. And I feel like as long as I've known you, and probably way before then, you have this itch to be like the first to do something, or maybe just trying different things. What is that from? Is that from, school? Is it from when you were a kid? Where do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I think we all have foundational pieces, right? Imagine those first two waves of your life. I think they call them like the wood phase, what are those, wood and metal and earth and water. And those are very foundational. I mean, in those ages, my parents got divorced. I was living on the West Coast, spent summers in San Diego, where my dad's family's from. I was born in LA and kind of grew up in San Diego on beaches in the summer, but for the most part, grew up in Seattle. And you have a Pacific Northwest edge to you. And then you go to school, and I think there's foundational things with my parents' divorce. My father was an Air Force colonel and was stationed so at age 8 or 9, I'm on a plane with my sister from LA by ourselves to Paris, and my dad's picking us there, and we're living in Belgium for the summer. And then he's based in Norway, and then he was at the Pentagon for 25 years. I think at an early stage, I was used to being put into experiences that seemed normal to me, like, okay, you just go here and go here. Well, I don't know, like root wherever you are. It's not like, other people had different experiences the first 7 or 14 years. You've always lived in that same house and you had the white picket fence. I didn't really experience that. And I think you have those influences in those first couple phases of your life that for me was sports, right? I just grew up as a huge sports fan because when I was growing up in Seattle, right, the Seahawks were new, the Mariners were new, the Sonics were in the championship for a couple years in a row when I was a little, when I'm an influential kid. So played sports, and I think team sports gave me that connection that I probably didn't have or feel as much in my family life. Like you're connected with a team and your togetherness, and I think that influences you. And but I think I don't know, from an innovation standpoint, yeah, I like the new thing. Like, who's doing something that's unique and different, or just a different way to think about something? Like, I've always been interested and curious about, like, the three of us think about things totally different. And this could be red states, blue states, politics, everything, religion. So I was always kind of curious because I was in different places, experiencing different people. Like, when you're in San Diego, that's very different than being on an Air Force base in Belgium. It's very different than being in DC. That's very,
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know, I think probably childhood, those first phases kind of create that. And for me, I get energized by that. When I see Paul doing some cool new social, I'm like, what? Tell me more. I'm interested. I'm energized by it. How can I take that and make what I'm doing better? Because I think if we're not, then it's boring. I'm just not challenged. If I'm doing this, the freaking Disney on Ice the same way all the time, it's like, I loved the creativity of Arena World and the diversity of it, right? When I was working for a team, yeah, it gets a little boring. It's another 41 home games. I was traveling when I was with the Bullets and Wizards to half the road games, right? But when you're in your 20s and you're in that fire, like third wave, that's fun, man. You're like, I'm on charter jets and babysitting guys making $20 million, but I'm at the Four Seasons, in Milwaukee or whatever. Like, there's so much kind of learning and stuff going on. But I think you just try to stack those as you go.
I mean, obviously, those young days of being on the road are a lot different from what you're doing now, but you're still in a unique and new area of your life where you're kind of living, I don't want to say living on the road, but you kind of are living on the road, right?
Tour de Delaney.
So talk to us about this Delaney world tour that you're on.
Oh man.
How does it work? I think I'm absolutely fascinated by it.
I think digital nomad just sounds more glamorous than homeless, right? But no, I think it started at the end of the last wave. COVID, I think, accelerated it for all of us. We were all drowning during those phases of like, oh my gosh, how do we get out of this thing? And for me, COVID and everything else just happened to be timed with just a tumultuous, maybe couple year period where you're like, wow, what is going on? Like this is, and then when I started to like step back, right, and look at your life from afar a little bit and say, well, oh, this makes sense now. You're entering into another wave here. And what is that? And it's a little scary not knowing what that wave is, right? And that's what I love about this audience, right? You're our EVMC family. You have some people who are amazing and in the middle of that fire, way. They're in their 20s, they're 2, 3, 4 years into their arena life, and they're just like, go to EVMC. I call it the fire conference because
right.
Most of those people are younger in their careers, and it's
you can
so
tell
much
that
energy.
they can't get enough. It's like they're like hours be damned. They're like, I'm here for the content. I'm here for the challenge. I know it's very invigorating.
And it is, and I think if you remember yourself in that. You're like, oh my God, that was, and you're coming, your new ideas, and you're just soaking it in, and then the crowd that still goes, or that is maybe even out of the industry now, but is in that like earth phase of like, you got kids, you got family, you still work in the arena maybe, and it's just a different mentality. And I think where you get to be me now more of I think they call it like a water phase or something where, yeah, it's more fluid. You have more time and energy to commit to something besides your kids. And you're no longer a professional Uber driver and coaching the soccer games and doing all that fun stuff, Dave, that we've done and going to the practices you miss it. And you love that part of those chapters. And you're like, oh my gosh, but I don't necessarily want it back. I'm glad that those happen. And now what? And I think I got to the point where I was like, wow, my kids are gone. I don't have any family in Boston. My friends are all over the world, It's like, and I had always had in my head of like, wouldn't it be cool to like live in a different city for like a month at a time? I'd been thinking about that for a year, and it doesn't seem like something anybody would actually do. And then when I started to kind of look at my life, I'm like, well, maybe I could or go for a couple months. And I started with Austin, Texas, where I was like, we went from Boston to Austin. And how do I marry this up, like my desire to just experience some other places, right? Places you've been to for a conference or whatever. Denver, right? We were there. That's an amazing conference, right? What's it like to live in Denver for a few months? I don't know, like just live there. Where do you go to get your groceries? Where do you get my haircut?
It's costly, I'll tell you.
Yeah, but I was like, shoot, compared to Boston, no,
True,
nothing.
right?
True.
So
Yeah.
nothing's, and you don't have, you could live any, so I just started thinking about it. And I said, how do I marry that up with, we're all venue geeks. You guys are as much a venue geek as I am. And what if, so I drove Boston to Austin and hit venues along the way of, again, right, Paul, we talked about like innovative stuff, just kind of connecting with people, but more like what's going on. I'm going to secret shop the Philadelphia, the new premium stuff in Philly. I'm going to buy a ticket to the Sixers, just experience it. I take tons of videos and photos along the way, just sort of for my own learning, right? Some places I go where I know those people. I'm like, oh, come over here. Or you're going to be in Raleigh. Come. Oh, we have Hootie and the Blowfish that night. Come on. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess. But I'm more interested in walking the concourse and chatting with them about what the new plans are. And so I think that 2-week trek from Boston to Austin really just sparked a new energy for me of I go through Nashville and Memphis and Dallas and Little Rock and just checking out venues and seeing people. And then I spent a couple months in Austin at South by Southwest. And right, you put yourself, there's a book, Stephen Pressfield is a kind of a writer of a bunch of little tiny like businessy kind of books. And he has one that's called Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Is. And I think I read it. I don't know. I believe that books and people and things come into your life at certain, I don't know, magical points that when you need to hear that, or your friend needs to tell you that,
Sure.
that thing you needed to hear. Or I don't know. I just choose to believe in that way that I read that book at a certain point where I was like, oh, I think maybe it's okay. Maybe you need to be, in order to do these things, you need to put your ass where your heart is. And it was like, if you want to be in the movie business, what are you doing in Columbus? I mean, no offense to Columbus or Cleveland, but you might have more opportunities in New York or LA, and you put yourself out there and you give it all you can, but physically and geographically, those things matter.
Sure.
And he had a line like, the Dalai Lama doesn't live in Terre Haute, Indiana. Like, where do you, who are you? What do you, and I was like, you know what? This is authentically who you are. I do love innovation of whatever that means. And I love venues, and I love not working in a single one. Like I love being outside a single bubble where you can see all these things and what everyone's doing. And it was a really cool time. And then living in Austin and like, I live here. I'm going to call Jeff Nickler and pop over to Moody Center and check out what OVG is doing there. I don't need to see an event. I just want to, roam around. And I got like a master class, what Jeff and Casey and that crew are doing there, like what they did at BOK before that. It's like, wow. I mean, just little things that are just only we would appreciate. Only this audience would appreciate, right? Because we're all in it. And we're like, oh, man. And then, I'm going to go over and check out the Austin FC new soccer stadium. Had a buddy there and go experience the premium. Whoa. Interesting. Matthew McConaughey designed this thing, and just, you learn stuff, and it's a different culture. I don't want to live in Austin, Texas in July, but amazing during South by and being there, and then go live in Denver for a while, go live in Vancouver. Like we all love Vancouver, like, the conference living there it's just amazing. And I grew up right down the street in Seattle, but it's a different experience to live in Vancouver. Bend, Oregon. What's it like to live in a small town in Oregon? It was in Santa Monica and Venice and San Diego. ALSD, doing some work with them, which is the premium seating conference, similar to EVMC that's been going for 35 years. They needed help. And okay, what's the evolution of ALSD? Premium is taken on a whole new life in venues. How can we be doing that better and sharing best practices? And so I said yes to helping them with doing a global premium summit at the O2 in London and living in London for several months. And right. So again, I think it just riding the wave of like, yeah, I can do that. Who knows if this makes any sense or what people will think, but yeah, it's been an amazing couple years of just being out there and now figuring out like, okay, what can we do with this? Like, how can we better share this content now, or how can it serve more people? So I think we'll still figure that out.
When we look at the industry as, the live event industry and venues, what could we be doing better? You see a lot of, I'm just curious, what can we as an industry be doing better?
I still think it goes back to stuff we talked about 15 and 20 years ago. Like, how do we share more and better and more often? I mean, I think that's what I love that you guys started this. Previously, for whatever, 35 years, EAMC, well, EMC, EAMC, EVMC, whatever. A great 4 days a year. Everyone get out of your bubble, come to Minneapolis, come to Denver, go to Atlanta, and we're going to all get together. There's going to be like a fucking fire and just like everybody's there together. And there's a lot of sharing there, yeah. Right? So much energy, so much sharing, so much openness. Paul and Matt weren't sitting there coming from Lexington, Kentucky, like, I'm not going to share my ideas with Boston. Like, these are our ideas. They were.
Is that my accent?
I don't know.
It was Texas. I'm not going to share my ideas with Boston. I'm not going to share
my ideas. I think that might have been Matt's accent more than yours, maybe. But yeah, whatever. There's none of that, right? Everyone's transparent and helping each other, and and I was like, how come we don't have this throughout the year? Get out, and then everyone go back to your bubble. Good luck. I don't know. And we started doing our own.
We'll see if you survive until next year.
Yeah. And I am, I'll admit it, kind of a big market snob, and have worked in big markets that, yeah, like Tammy Coolbeck from a small market, and we could share ideas and stuff, but we started creating our own little mini summit once a year where Boston, New York, Philly, we invited DC, we would meet up at the Garden in New York. We'd come down, they'd come up, and we do 2 days and maybe an event, and just we talk about big market problems. What's going on with Feld? With you guys? Oh yeah, let's hold the line. If the 4 or 5 of us markets hold the line with Feld or whoever, what are they going to do? We just created our own little mini kind of opportunities to connect, and then you'd connect with whoever. You'd call Paul during the year or something, but I'm always like, can't we systemize this a little more? But again, EVMC is a volunteer army. Full-time employees and, do this. But even ALSD that does have full-time employees still struggles with a year-round content and community and connection. And everyone has a big conference. Great. But I think that's been what I've been thinking about the last couple of years, especially bouncing in and out of multiple bubbles and getting to see things that I realized, oh my gosh, like nobody else is getting these experiences. So at a minimum, I'm starting a couple, blogs, and call it a glorified blog. I have one that I just started at venuepremium.com, which for now is just going to be my place where I put premium news and stuff I see. And I want to start Venue Safari, where we can do some tours and, maybe you can get out of your bubble a little more often. And a couple people I had a call earlier today where with a high profile teams and venues who are thinking about renovating suites. What are you seeing? And I'm like, yeah, why don't we have this? And I said, what we should do is get a little venue safari for you where we get out and you go see a couple, bring 4 people. And and it's got to be multidisciplinary, right? It used to be so siloed. Marketing, do your thing over here. Box office over there.
Right.
Ops.
Yeah.
Now, why aren't I want the chef, marketing, the salespeople, ops, get 6, 7 people there, finance, whatever, and seeing these things. Because you go, in ALSD in LA, we had 6 venue tours. The conference is great. The venue tours are magical.
Yeah.
Go
agreed.
to SoFi,
yeah.
right? And we see this at EVMC. Conference is great. The sessions are great. Panels are great. Blah, blah, blah. Some of it's the same old. The venue tours are out of this world, right? Experience Red Rocks, experience Ball Arena, you get out of your bubble, you see something different. Go to Atlanta. Atlanta's going to be amazing. Amazing venues, amazing people. You're going to come back energized. How come we can't do that more often? How do we, do that on a smaller scale? Like I kept saying, like, maybe it's a 3-day, 2-night, Boston, New York. Go bang out. We'll hit. And it's maybe 20 people. Like some kind of, I don't know. I think those are the things, Paul, that I bounce around. And I think I've gotten over caring what people think. I think for a number of years, you're like, oh, people think you're all over the map. Well, I literally am all over the map.
Yeah, so
and I'm like, you know what? Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? Who the hell cares? Because at a certain point, like, I don't really care. If people think you've lost your mind and you're like, it doesn't matter at that point. And the other thing I was thinking about, a book that inspired me recently, probably at the beginning of this, was, Rick Rubin.
Sure.
Who's at least a legendary music producer.
Yeah.
Whatever, Jay-Z, and he founded, I think,
Beastie Boys.
I mean, he did like Adele and everything. Have you read his book?
No.
Haven't.
Oh, all right. I'm going to gift that book to you and to whoever else wants it. It's called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. I think I read that book at a time when I needed to hear certain pieces of it, or I extracted certain phrases from it that I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. And part of his theory, it's like, how do you become like a hit master? Like how does that happen? Like, how does the creativity keep coming? Or how do you extract that from Jay-Z after one album? Adele has a major, huge album. How do you come back from that and have another hit album after that? Or how, some, different artists were having a hard time, and he would break it down, right? He'd be like, they were in a writer's block, kind of a, songwriter block. And he'd just give them a small assignment, like, come back tomorrow with one line. That's it. That's your assignment, is like one line. And it would force you to rethink how you were doing it. And the one line would be interesting, or maybe they tried to do one line and then it opened up something and there was a whole bunch. But part of his thing was like planting seeds. And some of those, like, you just plant creative seeds. And I think it gave me permission, or reading it was like, oh yeah, you know what? It's okay. Like, you can just have some random idea. You can plant it, and you can either choose to water it and make it something, or maybe it's just too early. Like, there's so many times I tried to do something and I'm like, and then 2.5 years later, that thing became a thing.
Right.
I mean, but I might have been 2 years ahead of Twitter or something. But the seed was there. Like, I knew but it germinates at different times.
Well, think about like QR codes, right? Like, people try to force QR codes.
Great example.
Everyone thought QRs are coming. Oh my gosh, it's the future. And it was just this massive anticipation that never happened. And then wait for it. Probably 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years after they were originally being pushed, they now are very common. And some of that has to do with the pandemic, but it is a good example of just this, you never know. Sometimes you find the right thing, but it's just not the right time.
Yeah. And I think, right, apply that to the rest of your life. On a personal level, a relationship, a whole bunch of things in your life that, like, all you can do is be the best version of yourself in that moment. And like, okay, I don't know. And try the things that you feel like are going to help you grow, or that are going to keep moving you down that direction, or staying on that wave that you're supposed to be on, or looking at where, as a kid, right, in San Diego and boogie boarding, or trying to be a surfboarder or whatever, you watch the waves. Like, you're watching the waves that are coming at you right now, but you also need to watch the waves 2 and 3 and 5 behind them, because you're looking for ones that are going to destroy you if they hit you over the head. So they're going to be really hurtful for you.
Yeah.
Or the ones that you can capitalize on, that you're like, oh, that's my friggin' wave right there, man. I can see it. It's building. I think it's coming. Oh yeah, I'm taking that wave. If you've done that, you're like, I'm taking that one. Or you're telling your buddy that, take that one. Because that's what you do when you're riding the waves and you're trying not to drown. And I think that book was really cool, because it was like, yeah, it allows you to live the creative life without knowing what album's going to be a hit or what's not. And part of his philosophy is like, you put the art out there. It is not for you to decide if that Red Hot Chili Peppers album is good, is bad. That is for the audience to consume and for them to judge. Some people love Adele, some people don't. Some people hate Jay-Z, some people love Jay. Some people love 2 or 3 Jay-Z songs and not the other, whole rest of the album. That's me. So I think that's part of it. And then for me, the big hurdle was, who are you, right? But then what are people thinking? Or do people, and you just get over that as you go. You're like, who cares? I don't know. Or because people have thought I'm crazy. I remember when you leave a job, I remember leaving the Bullets and Wizards. I'd been with this team for 7 years. They were like, that was my fire years. My 20s were with this NBA team. We just had some magical people and players at the time. And it was an amazing time in my life. But I got at that point where the next chapter I could see was coming was I wanted to get married. I wanted to have kids. Those things were not going to be in the DC area for me. They were going to be in Boston. I was like, well, if they're going to be in Boston, I just got to do it. I got to politely quit this job that I love, but I had outgrown it. And I couldn't envision being this is not a job you do for another 10 or 20 years. How are you staying on the road and having a family? And I'm like, but how do you take that experience and jump onto the next wave and ride that? And not knowing that wave was going to take me from pro teams. The bridge was the Patriots for a little bit and then into arena life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a magical arena world that is same stuff, but different. And I was riding a whole new wave. But I remember when I quit in DC, people were like, you're crazy. Like, you've got this amazing job. And I'm like, but it's a job. And when I jumped off the cliff to leave the Garden, we were finally killing it. You spend the first 10 years building a new arena and the branding and getting the teams from dead last to better, and then you leave. You're like, you are out of your mind. You're doing what? That sounds risky. I don't. And at a certain point, you get over it, and you're like, it's fine. So it's fun to be out there, kind of finding the next wave.
Well, I have loved hearing about the waves that you're riding, and I can't wait to find out what's next for you. Before we wrap things up today, I want to hit you with our Fast Five. It's just 5 questions, just looking for your short, immediate response. First up, what was your very first concert?
I was never a music guy growing up. I was sports and playing sports and watching sports, and probably you guys have heard of Bumpershoot, which is a big it's like an outdoor festival thing. It's been going since I was a kid.
Seattle.
And I'm sure, Seattle, down by the Seattle Center. They'd have a big festival every year. And it was probably my first experience with live music and concert that kind of made it seem like, wow, this is but it was about the experience of being in Bumpershoot with multiple stages and multiple artists. And I think, that was attractive to me versus one act as multiple things, which makes sense.
Do you have a favorite event you've attended as a attendee, not as something you worked?
Oh, yeah, by far and away was the MLB All-Star Game at Fenway Park many years ago now that I brought my dad to.
Oh,
and I think that's right. I think all of us who do this and work in teams and venues, and we get jaded by it all, and you forget how important it is, or you forget the magic you're making for all these people, that on any given night, there's some magical thing happening that we don't get the luxury of hearing about it usually, but are there in a lifetime moment. And that was for me, Fenway Park's a magical place, right? I didn't grow up in Boston, but it's the old Garden and Fenway and my dad, I've never been a huge baseball fan, but my dad was a huge baseball fan. And at that All-Star game was when they had Kevin Costner announcing the players.
Oh, yeah.
And they had the all-century team or something. They brought out Field of Dreams,
they came out, yes.
Remember? Yeah. And all these guys are coming out, legends. I don't even know half these players probably. But my dad, we were sitting next to me, and it was like he was a 8-year-old kid again. These were all of his heroes coming out. And he grew up in San Diego, where Ted Williams, the same neighborhood as Ted Williams grew up. And they traipsed Ted Williams out, who threw out the first pitch. And I thought,
That's great.
That's as good as it gets.
I could care less. I mean, I don't know who won. I could care less where it was, but that moment of being, with my dad, which I don't have a lot of, never had a lot of time or opportunities with him. Like, yeah, it was special.
What city's got the best food?
I'm telling you, the Austin, Texas food scene, man, legit.
Good to know.
Like,
Yeah, we had plenty of Tex-Mex at EAMC when we were out there.
yeah, you can have that,
And
but like
barbecue,
they've got,
but
I
they
mean, but
probably have
no,
all
there are all
kinds.
kinds of different things now that I think it is definitely the foodie scene in Austin, Texas is pretty amazing.
What city or venue is still on the Jim Delaney bucket list?
I was going to say my ultimate bucket list for my entire career has been the Colosseum in Rome, but I just checked it off 2 months ago. I finished up our project at the O2 in London, and I was like, you know what? I'm so close. I got to go to Rome.
I got to do it.
I got to go. I'm here. So I finally did the Colosseum and Circus Maximus, and then went to Athens and saw the Acropolis. And I think those have always been kind of the bucket list items for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, so I don't have a new one other than Japan. I mean, I want to get to maybe go to one of those crazy baseball games in Japan or something.
Yeah.
But like, I think checking out some venues on that side of the world, especially at one point in my life, I was fluent in Japanese. So I got to get back
Were you really?
Try that again. Yeah.
Last question. What's your theme song? There's a Jim Delaney reality TV show where cameras follow you on the road. What's the song that plays over the opening credits?
Nobody needs to watch that show.
It's a limited run series.
I know.
It's on Lifetime.
All right, I'm gonna stick with kind of the Rick Rubin era. I'm gonna go Jay-Z's "Dust Off My Shoulder." Dust off your shoulder. That song.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's the song right now that I'm listening to that gets me pumped up and going out for a run.
On that note, we'll wrap things up here. Jim, if somebody wanted to learn more or follow you or reach out to you, with anything you want to plug here.
Oh man, JimDelaney.com. Again, early adopter here. Get on those URL train early when it came out. JimDelaney.com is my URL that currently just goes right to my LinkedIn page. But that's the best place to connect. I love connecting with different people, especially different team and venue people, and sharing ideas and learning and teaching. And so hit me there.
Wonderful. Hey, thank you so much for the time today. I'm so glad we could finally get you on. I think a lot of people
you guys finally beat me down.
Yeah. I think a lot of people will be inspired by the episode. So definitely appreciate the time, and we'll let you get back to looking out for the next wave.
Congrats on the century mark, guys. Amazing.
Thank you so much. And a big thanks to everybody for listening to this episode of Adventures in Venueland. Remember, you can subscribe and find more episodes wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We do love your 5-star reviews because it helps other people find us. Until the next episode and the next adventure, I'm Dave Rettelberger.
And I'm Paul Hooper. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Adventures in Venueland is a side project of the Event and Venue Marketing Conference, a marketing conference that brings together diversified event and venue professionals to cultivate education, collaboration, and innovation for the growing sports and live entertainment industry. Find out more at eventvenuemarketing.com.
Audio editing and mixing by Camille Faulkner.
Design and digital advertising by Megan Ebeck.
Copywriting and publicity by Samantha Marker.
Guest booking and brand strategies by Paul Hooper.
Guest research by Dave Rettelberger.
Marketing strategies by Paul Hooper, Megan Ebeck, and Samantha Marker. Thanks for joining us. Until the next adventure.